Is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative people where millions get to explore together. Skillshare's got thousands of classes. As artists, you're going to love discovering topics in fine art, illustration, and more. Lots of Skillshare classes are under 60 minutes. With short lessons, you can fit them into the busiest of schedules. I thought at first I was going to watch a Skillshare class about marketing, but actually, I ended up watching Storytelling for Leaders, How to Craft Stories That Matter with Keith Yamashita. Got me thinking that I could learn all the marketing skills that I wanted, but that actually, the heart of marketing is being able to tell a good story. Skillshare is also super affordable, and annual subscription is less than $10 a month. The first 500 of our subscribers to click this link, which is also in the video description below, will get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Hello, I'm Professor Lieu. Welcome to our live stream. I'm here today with art prof teaching artist Deepti Menon and Eloise Sherrid. Today we are asking this question: whether artists should work, quote, for the exposure, in other words, entirely for free, or at well below the rate that in theory you should be paid for the type of work that you're doing. If you would like to grow as an artist and you can't afford an art class, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof, critiques and tutorials. This is a fairly common experience for a lot of artists. I would say that probably everybody who's worked professionally, at least for a few years, has at least a few stories of people asking them to do work with no financial compensation. Deepti, would you say you have a couple stories like that?
Definitely. No financial compensation or well below what I deserve is super, super common. And I think that's just the narrative for all artists, visual artists, performing artists. But in this, world, we're talking about visual artists. So how about you, Eloise?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's even as you progress further along in your career, it's like people still think you want to work for the exposure.
Well, I guess my question is for both of you, why does this happen to visual artists? Because I don't know that car mechanics have this problem. I think people do not go up to car mechanics and say, you should fix my car. It'll be great exposure for your career. And so why do people do this? Do you have a theory behind that, Deepti?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what people deem essential. And a lot of times people just don't see visual artists as people who are essential, or they just don't interact with visual artists in a way where they understand how much effort it goes into making one, illustration or one something. But, I think it is really interesting and important for us to educate people and let them know because, someone just put this comment, no, you can't eat exposure, Ashanti. And I think that's kind of sums it up. It is our livelihood and it's how we make money. And it's true, we can't eat exposure. We need to feed ourselves.
And this is a stream that I did fairly recently with Jordan, where we talk about these toxic artist myths and stereotypes. And I think one of the big ones is that we just whip this stuff out. It's no effort. It's so easy for us. And it's just not true. I mean, it's a ton of work, as all of you probably know, to do this. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, though, not everything is that black and white. And everything is a case-by-case basis. And there are indeed a few situations where I would say, you know what, that maybe is worth it. Like, Eloise, have you ever been in a situation where you did work for free and thought, you know what, that was worth it?
Yeah, I actually have been. And there's a few different reasons for that. I mean, one of them is sort of the professional exposure, right? Like networking and actually meeting people who, like, so for instance, I'm thinking of working in the film industry, where you will not get hired for paid jobs unless you have been seen and worked with on a film set doing the job in the first place. So you sometimes have to work for free to build the skills, to be seen, and then people will hire you.
Mm-hmm. Well, but how can you tell, Eloise, that it actually is worth it, because there definitely have been scenarios where I thought it was going to be worth it and it ended up being a disaster. So how do you know, like, what do you weigh in terms of the factors to consider?
You need to weigh how far along you are in your career, what stage you're at. You need to weigh what your current financial situation is. Are you in a situation where you can afford to work for free, or where you can afford to work for well below your market rate? And you also need to decide if, in certain situations, it's maybe a cause you care about or an organization that you think deserves your labor at a discounted rate, because that's also a consideration. What do you think, Deepti?
I agree. Everything you mentioned, I think, is very worthwhile. I think definitely when I'm looking at my portfolio, is this project being presented to me something that will really help my portfolio? If it is, perhaps that's worth. But I think that's something when you're earlier on in your career and you're trying to build a portfolio. But we have this comment from Lisa H that says, do you sign a contract for exposure? And I always say that, like, you absolutely should. I say you should put in a contract, like in a contract, what that exposure is, because in my experience, at least that guarantees that you get something out of it. When I've done animation work, I've said, when you post this, tag me on Instagram, make sure my full name is there and my credits are directed and animated by, if I can have my name in the animation as a credit, you know, stuff in as much as you can. If they're not going to give you money, put your name all over that thing so that when people see it, they will know how to find you and can find you super easily.
Another
I
thing
think that's a, go ahead.
Another thing is securing your right to use maybe the product for your own personal promotional purposes. Because sometimes like a contractor or a client will say that you are not able to reproduce this item, like say in a portfolio, like a public facing portfolio or in a reel. So you need to make sure that it's in writing that you're allowed to use that to benefit yourself.
I mean, I would say in general, anytime you do any type of work, you should have something written down, because you can get into some very sticky situations. And I did have a student once contact me. She was working for some company and she was very angry because they had put out the product and she was given no credit anywhere. And she did not anticipate that at all. But at that point, it had already been put out there and there wasn't anything she could do about it. And so it's something that you want to consider. It's like, are you even going to get credit? Some projects you don't get any credit at all. And I have definitely worked on projects where I didn't get credit and I didn't care, because it's like, fine, whatever. But there are other situations where I'm like, hey, I put a lot of time into that. I really deserve the recognition for the work that I did, even if it was pro bono. Now, here's the thing. I think another thing to consider if you do decide to do work for free is, are you in essence hurting the industry in any way by doing that? Deepti, can you maybe explain what that's all about?
That's huge. I think that's one of the biggest things I try and tell people when we're having this conversation, because a lot of times when you agree I can speak from an animation perspective, a lot of times when you agree to do a video for well below what is, you know, scale or what we deserve, that kind of sets the bar that low, and it tells people that that's what they can charge in the future. And then it affects everyone, because all of a sudden, if one person is agreeing to work for, you know, $10 an hour on this video, then they're like, well, you should also, and you should also. And then suddenly everyone has to deal with this. So realizing what we are worth as a community and what we need to survive, and not even just survive. I think we all deserve to survive and then some, and have a, you know, decent lifestyle through our income. Realizing that and putting that forward is not only good for you, but good for just the community in general. But what do you think, Eloise?
100% agree. And I think this is a situation where it becomes really important to cultivate peers in your field so that you guys can compare notes about what the going rate is for a given service. Because you will frequently find yourself in situations where people are trying to propose you, work for the exposures, or like work for a certain amount of money, and you need to honestly like run it by someone else and be like, is this worth it? Or is this the right rate that I should be charging?
And those rates are really hard to figure out. Nobody tells you that stuff in art school. I mean, people, I don't know, I almost feel like talking about money in art school was this taboo thing that you should never do. And then it really screws with people when they get out of school, because I get these panicked calls from recent grads and they're like, I just got this commission. I have no idea what to charge. And so I think consulting with other artists and finding out, okay, what is reasonable, what's unreasonable would be very important. And sometimes you learn the hard way. Like, Deepti, you just made this amazing piece of animation, but ultimately in the end, it ended up being a great experience, but you were not really given the rate that you should have gotten. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it was my own fault, because what I took from it was, we're in a pandemic. I don't have any work coming in. I was offered a gig, and the amount that I asked for, they agreed to. But then what I did and what I realized was, hey, I'm getting to make this thing and I really want it to look cool and be a good portfolio piece, because I haven't made something like this in a while and I want to have more opportunities like this. So I went a little nuts and I made it like the best thing I could possibly do. And I'm super proud of it. And the client is very happy. But at the end of the day, I put in so many more hours than I should have been. But in that case, I understand that it was kind of my own doing. It wasn't the client pushing that on me whatsoever. But it was, again, like we talked about in the beginning, an opportunity that I was given that I was really excited about. And I wanted more opportunities like that. So I saw that as an opportunity for myself to really like jump on that. And there's this comment actually from Erica, who says, did a chalkboard for a campus cafe. It was probably the only chance I got to work on a large scale art. And later on they go to say, I'm just starting out though, so my situation's different. But I think, like, you know, with murals and large scale art, sometimes people just don't trust you for something that big if you don't have any experience. So in Erica's situation, when they're just starting out, maybe doing that for free, if you really would like to pursue that, is the only way you can have one portfolio piece to get your foot in the door. I don't know, though.
And also, I think to consider, okay, the work I make that comes out of this particular job, can I use it in the future as a portfolio piece? Because I definitely have done gigs where I'm like, yep, goodbye to that artwork. I am never going to look at you ever again. And it's totally fine. But there's other times where it's like, wow, I really came out with a significant portfolio piece. I'm going to want to show this to other people. Have you ever had that happen, Eloise?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I have been able to turn those opportunities into paid commissions. But honestly, frankly, sometimes I have to do it by saying, oh, like omitting the fact that I did the piece for pro bono or at a discounted rate. Like I sort of represent it as work that I did at the rate that I'm trying to get paid for now.
Right. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, every single thing is case by case.
Yeah, this is an interesting question that kind of goes back to Eloise's statement, which says, what if there are not many peers in the industry? Like the number of artists that do my thing are either starting out like me or having big name clients. So it's difficult to compare notes. Do either of you have experience with that?
I mean, I think if you really have no idea, you have to say, we'll start with, what is the lowest rate I will take and not feel angry afterwards? And if the rate is $10, you're like, hey, I'll be happy to do that. I mean, if you offered me $10, I would be like, goodbye. But maybe somebody who's out of school, who's never done a professional gig, that's maybe very enticing for them. Maybe they don't have a family that they're supporting. Maybe they're just supporting themselves. In that situation, that totally makes sense to me. For my situation, that's not a good deal. Eloise, what about you?
I think that it's a situation where, you know, if you want to start getting really specific in terms of like, look at what the minimum wage is like the actual like legal minimum wage is in your area, and then calculate what above that your work is worth, because presumably you don't think you're worth minimum wage. Not that there is anything wrong with working minimum wage, but a sort of skilled, like very specific, refined skill, like just sort of like extrapolate based on that and run some numbers, you know. Maybe you add up a bunch of numbers, you know, like calculated by the number of hours that you think this will work, and you arrive at a fee. Add in taxes, add in expenses, and that's how I generally start coming to the fees that I charge.
I'd also like to note that a lot of times I use social media as a way of connecting with people who are like not like me, but just a notch above. Like, for example, I like to do animated music videos, and a lot of times I will find animators who do music videos and message them and just be like, hey, how do you calculate? I've done this before. How do you calculate what you charge? And I'm not asking them for like, tell me what you would charge for this, but they'll say something similar. Like, you know, in general, my day rate ranges from this to this. If it's colored or just, I'm talking about in the term of animator, but if I'm coloring it, if it's just black and white, there's two different rates, you know, like what to say, like give them bullet points. And that's super helpful because, you know, that's the level that you're aspiring to be or where you think that you're at. So talking how they speak and presenting yourself that way is a really great way of not only getting what you think you deserve, but also keeping it so that everyone continues to get what they deserve. And we're not doing what we were talking about before, which is like, you know, watering down the pool of what we all deserve.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to do. And actually, some of you guys might want to check out this stream that Alex, Eloise, and I did about freelancing, because a lot of the jobs that we're talking about right now, they are freelance gigs. They're not negotiating your salary for an annual salary for a company. This is very much gig by gig. And so that's what I think makes it really hard, is that because it's one job at a time, you never really know. The clients are always different. I mean, it's really, really hard. One thing that I have definitely done in the past is sometimes I will do either pro bono or significantly offer a lower rate if I really feel there's a need. Now, that's different than, for example, saying, oh, I want to do it to get exposure or marketing. Because, for example, I actually had a school district contact me a few weeks ago, and they explained we're a low income district. We have all these teachers. They need training because of remote learning that's going to start happening. And I said, well, how much can you give me? And the amount was like a quarter what I usually charge. And I thought to myself, you know what, though, after talking to the person on the phone, I could hear how much they needed my skill set and how much it was going to help a lot of those people. And I thought, you know what, it's okay, it's fine, because I'm helping people that really need that. And so you will get opportunities like that where you feel like you're doing it as a gesture of goodwill. And that, I think, is very valuable in terms of the community. Like, Eloise, have you ever done anything like that where it was because you really just wanted to help people out?
Yes, 100%. And again, like I was saying earlier, sometimes I've turned the product of that work into future paid opportunities. But the one thing I will say, in like a slight caveat to that, is also that like sometimes organizations or people who you do things for in that way, like, may not be able to make use or like understand exactly what it is that they're getting from you. And like that has to do with them not recognizing the value, but also maybe like in the case of an organization, not necessarily having the infrastructure to support something like, say, a video commission that can be used ideally in like a big like campaign, but like realistically, they don't have the infrastructure to handle.
Right. Absolutely. Now, what about when friends and family ask you to work for free? And tell us in the chat, have you guys ever had a family member, a friend say, oh, you're an artist, I need a logo. It's always a logo. I don't know why. It's a logo or a tattoo. And you're my friend. Can you please do it for free? How do you navigate that? Because you don't want to be a total jerk and say, oh, no, but it can get a little dicey when it's friends and family. Like, Deepti, have you ever had that happen?
I have. The first time it ever happened to me, actually, they offered to pay me. And I was in school and I was so willing to do it for free because it was a portfolio piece, but they were like, no, 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 I want to pay you, which kind of set me up for success, I think, which when I understood that, like, oh, this person who I love and who I'm like close to is offering to pay me, which, like, at least in my culture, like family, you don't ask for money. Like, you know, it was a weird thing to understand. But then I realized, again, it goes back to everything. Like, you want to set yourself up for success. If you say yes once, you're going to have to keep saying yes to doing work for free, because then they're going to be like, well, why now? But I think what it comes down to is I've gotten very used to telling people that, like, I would love to spend the time doing this, but I'm not in a position financially where I can give up these hours to work on this because I really do need the money, and that's the truth. And, you know, I could be using these hours to be making money that I need for my rent or my livelihood. And when I say that, how can they say no to that? Because it's the honest truth. So, you know, what to do.
Well, I definitely have made this mistake where I think for a lot of people, if you have not actually had it happen to you, the first reaction is, oh, it's my friend Sarah. And because she's my friend, this is going to be so much easier because she and I get along and we have such a good time going out to the movies together. And that changes. Like, Eloise, I know you've definitely worked on some projects where you thought, oh, we're friendly. That's okay. We'll be fine. And then what has happened in some circumstances?
You end up not being fine and not being friendly, and then suddenly things get really nasty with money.
It's ugly. And so I would actually say to you guys, my advice, don't work with friends and family. It's 9 times out of 10 a really bad idea. It just gets so awkward. And actually, some of the people that I know who have hired friends, not only do you destroy your friendship, but you always discover that one of you is really unprofessional, right? And it's usually, I'm usually the one who's like, come on, I hired you, I'm paying you money to do this, and you still can't do it. It's just really dicey when it comes to friends and family. Very,
this
very
is an
hard.
Interesting comment. Yes, I've been asked to design a logo, and even after I explained that I'm not a graphic artist, I don't know how to create a logo, they still want me to do it. That's so interesting because I've been in that situation where someone's like asking me to do something and I'm like, not all artists are the same. You want to invest in an artist who actually knows how to do this. But then it also goes back to the fact that if they're asking you and they're pushing you so hard, it's probably because they want you to do it for free and they know you'll probably do it for free and no one else will do it for free. And, you know, I agree. I think if it's, you know, your grandmother, Lisa H said, if my 84-year-old grandmother or mother asked for a tattoo design, I'd say yes. That, you know, that makes sense. But you always have to think about the amount of time you're putting in and the effort and if it's really worth it for where you're at in life right now.
And I mean, I understand the impulse for, oh, if I do this gig, they'll hire me in a second because I'm not being paid and I'm getting the work experience and the work is out there. Especially, let's say you just finished school and you have so little experience and you're applying for jobs, but the jobs want you to have experience in order to apply for those jobs. And so I know for a lot of artists, it can feel very desperate when you first get started. I mean, Eloise, did you go through that phase at some point?
Sure. Yeah, I did, definitely. And that's just when you've got to do that calculus and be like, what will I actually get out of this concretely?
Or mess up and say never again afterwards, which I certainly have done on many different occasions. It's very, very hard. But I will say, you guys, the more experience you get with all these different gigs, it does get easier to put your foot down.
Absolutely.
I mean, Deepti, has that become easier to do?
So much so. I think in the past year, especially, I've really gotten good at just explaining also. Like a lot of times I would just get nervous and say yes because I didn't feel like they would understand. But I think I've gotten very good at understanding. And I read on Instagram, actually, someone told me that it's good to just have a bullet point sheet that explains your process and why things take as long as they do, and revisions and what revisions are, and just all these things that people just don't think about. But like, I actually had this experience I just remembered last week where a friend of mine asked me to do something for them and said that they were willing to commission it. And I wrote him back and I said, I'd love to do this, but this is the minimum I can do it for. And that was like a friends and family discount thing. Even that, I'm like, I shouldn't have done it. But, you know, I was like, this is the minimum, but it was still something I felt like was worth my time, whatever. And he actually wrote me back. I wrote him a whole list of why I felt that that was the minimum. He wrote me back and he said, I had no idea that it would take you this long. I definitely don't have the budget, but like, I really appreciate it. And I totally understand that. And I think you deserve it. And then he ended up getting a grant this week and reached out to me and said, I won some grant money. I'd love to commission you and give you what you asked for. And I felt so good about it because I knew that working on it for anything less would have truly broken my heart and just made me feel like so tired and not what I wanted. And then having him come back, and also just knowing that in the future, this person will give other people what they deserve because now they have this information, feels really, really, really good. And at the end of the day, I was like, I put my foot down and I did it and I'm getting what I want.
Yeah. And I think that that's such a good experience because now you have educated somebody else who's in a position to commission work, and they're going to carry that for the rest of their lives. They're always going to remember that conversation they had with you where they started to understand what was actually involved. So I do think it's like one person at a time. I mean, I get people who contact me, I mean, almost every day. I get at least one or two people who say, I really need you to critique my work. This is so important to me. I'm like, I'm sure it is, but do you think I just sit around critiquing work for fun whenever I feel like it? I mean, my time is so valuable, and you feel bad saying no to people, but at a certain point, it's just not sustainable, right? A long time ago, I used to write people things here and there, but I'm so in demand now that it's hard for me to do that. So Eloise, how do you get to the point where you really can put your foot down? Is it just experience, or is it just fed up to the point where you just got to do it?
Experience and getting fed up to the point where you have to do it. I mean, like, I'm thinking of a very specific situation where I, like, the goalposts of the engagement shifted over time, where, like, when I agreed to do the work for free, it was sold to me as like, oh, you're going to get to like really express yourself artistically. This is going to be a great platform for you. So I was like, okay, there's some stuff I want to say. I'm going to put it out there and it's going to be like adequate compensation. And then he kept changing what it was that he wanted me to be doing until it like became clear that what I was actually doing for him was like work for hire, but for my own artistic development. And I was just like, I have other shit. I have other things to do.
Yes, I bet you have other things to do, Eloise. So, yeah, it's something that I think a lot of artists struggle with. It is hard because we feel so complimented when people want to hire us. I mean, do you think that that's true, Deepti, that there's that initial like, oh, you want me? And it's sort of a surprise when you don't have a lot of experience.
Absolutely. And also, like you said, when you don't have a lot of experience and nobody thinks that you have any skills to give, and then someone does, of course, you're going to feel elated. And I really think it just comes down to the formula of like, where are you at with your career? Is this going to help you? Is this going to be a portfolio piece? Remembering that it shouldn't just be a favor. It should give you some sort of joy. Even like I was thinking about the family thing, and John Foster has this comment that says, I like to paint portraits of my grandkids. My wife likes to gift them to our children. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Like I sometimes when I'm home, I like to draw things to, you know, give to my parents to have them put around the house because I just, you know, it's a good way to spend my time. It gives me joy. And like the financial aspect of it isn't even a thought because it's a joyful thing for both parties involved, sure, do that. Like, you know, but again, it's all thinking about, in my opinion, are you getting what you think you deserve? And are you feeling like you're putting out more than you're getting?
Well, and I think ultimately a lot of these situations, it comes down to really know how to stand up for yourself and to protect yourself. And it bothers me so much how much artists have to do this. I mean, there's so many other fields where people don't have to justify how much work it is or how much they slaved over I mean, Deepti, didn't you say on that animation you did, you were doing 12-hour days for 6 weeks every day?
I was doing 14-hour days for 8 weeks every day, including weekends, maybe even longer. And I have a roommate who will back me up on this, who dealt with cranky Deepti for 2 months. But like, you know, in that situation, of course, my health took a toll. Of course, my mood took a toll. But at the end of the day, it was my own doing to myself. I would have never stood up for that if the client was pushing that on me. But I knew at the end of the day, I went to sleep happy because I knew that it was my own motivation that was pushing me to do it, and like me wanting a certain end result, not the client. But if the client was doing that, it would be a lot more difficult for me to stomach it because it just, you know, it wouldn't be giving me something that I felt I wanted.
Yeah. Wait, just really quick. I just want to say that like a situation like that, like you're describing, where maybe if the client was pushing for you to like put in all these extra hours, is like a situation where I would like advise people to go for an hourly rate as opposed to a flat rate. Because especially like when there's like a revision process or anything like that, those hours can start like building up. So this is sort of a side note to what you're saying, because of course like what you're talking about is like work that you were imposing on yourself because you wanted the product to be amazing. But if it was the client doing that, anticipating that would be the situation, would be like, okay, I'm going to do that for an hourly rate.
Yeah. And also just wanted to shout out John Murph de Vera. Thank you so much for this. This is amazing.
Really appreciate your support, you guys. You're the reason why Art Prof can exist as 100% free platform, because we rely entirely on your support and donations. By the way, you guys, in case you didn't hear, Art Prof has a podcast now. Due to Lauren Welch basically bothering me about it for 4 years nonstop, she's figured out the technique that my kids use, which is just bother me till I give in. Anyway, the Art Prof podcast, it's available on Spotify. It's also available on iTunes. Please leave us a rating and a review, because we like to be told that we're awesome pretty much all the time. So just whenever you guys can do that. Please join us on the Discord, because in about 5 minutes or so, me, Deepti, and Eloise, we're going to be hanging out in the post live streams channel. You can chat with us. It's our little post-stream after party to discuss further. Subscribe to our channel and join the Art Prof family. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters who make all of this possible. Thank you to everybody for your thoughtful comments, for contributing to this discussion. Everybody, please stay safe. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.